McLaren has just released their 2024 car out of nowhere. It is a sign of McLaren's confidence and progress that, just short of a year after a deliberately delayed 2023 launch, the company is revealing a surprise mid-January livery for its 2024 Formula One car, the MCL 38, which, for the first time in a few years, is actually a design worth hiding for a little longer. Though the real details of the car will most likely evolve much more than its very familiar livery, we will have to wait until February 14th for the first clues. And it will most likely be pre-season testing in Bahrain on February 21st before we see what McLaren is working on to attempt to beat Red Bull this season. However, by jumping ahead of everyone else in launch season, McLaren has taken a symbolic move while also releasing some extra information regarding more serious concerns. This unexpected start to the launch season teaches us more than just the MCL 38's very recognizable color palette. It also shows us their confidence for next year. While preparations for the MCL 38's official introduction next month continue at the facility, McLaren at least felt confident enough to jump the gun and be the first to reveal details this year. Following its spectacular turnaround in form last year, when it moved from near the rear of the field to close the season as Red Bull's major rival, speculation is strong over whether McLaren can maintain its rate of advancement this season. But, in an early indication of the team's confidence in their 2024 car, team principal Andrea Stella has disclosed that the momentum McLaren set up last season has been sustained. When asked for input on the measures McLaren has been able to take this winter, Stella stated, "So far, I have to say we don't see diminishing returns. This obviously will have to be proven once we put the car on the ground, but when it comes to the wind tunnel development or the CFD development, we see that the gradient we established last year that led to the Austria development and then the Singapore development, it seems like we can maintain it. So that's also where I would expect the launch car to be at the start of the season." Stella's perspective on the car's progress is a far cry from McLaren's position last year, when it publicly conceded that its launch spec car was inadequate. "When it comes to aero efficiency, downforce, drag, it's ultimately numbers, so you can track them quite well," he said. "We saw that last year we had a period of plateauing and we needed to change, from a conceptual point of view, the direction such that we could recover this momentum in terms of development. This year we haven't experienced this kind of plateauing in the development tracker and gradient, and we see the concepts we had established in last year's car had quite a lot more to offer, just in incremental gains that you can cash in. So a completely different scenario." Beyond the launch specifications, Stella claims that McLaren is already unlocking further advantages that will be achieved in updates available early in the campaign. "In the background, we are already starting to work on the further developments that we hope to bring relatively soon in season, and they also seem to be quite interesting," he added. Despite being the first team to announce its 2024 livery, McLaren finally has something worth hiding for the start of the season. Since of the conditions surrounding 2022 and 2023, McLaren did not have a problem displaying the genuine car at its introduction a year ago, since it was dissatisfied with the car anyway. Now, things are different. While McLaren is certainly eager to start talking about 2024 and sounds optimistic, it will be less transparent about the car's concept now that it has something to hide. It appears to be delivering on Lando Norris's promise late last year that, for the first time in his career, McLaren would have a launch car that is where it needs to be, rather than depending on upgrades to catch up on its development goals. While there aren't many graphics, it's known where McLaren has focused its efforts and how pleased it is with its progress thus far. Last year, it was clear that McLaren spent a significant amount of time and money revamping the car's aerodynamic structure, but was unable to make nearly as much progress as needed in basic areas such as suspension design. Everyone has been expecting this to be different on the MCL 38 for months, and Stella has now all but confirmed it, citing aerodynamic development, suspension, and tyre interaction as the main focus points. Definitely, we've been able in every area to keep generating good ideas and to keep having good interactions in the team with clarity as to who is doing what, with the value of the ideas brought to the table that were competitive, Stella said. So all this seems to be in a much better place. The aim has been to sustain the high development curve that resulted in big advances in Austria and Singapore last year, when McLaren brought major upgrade packages as it moved away from its restricted first aero package and into a much more blatantly Red Bull-inspired design. Stella is happy, stating that, "We don't see diminishing returns. Although McLaren cannot claim that its development gradients are steep enough to outperform rivals such as Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari, Stella identified a lack of competitive, daring ideas as a key problem prior to reorganizing the technical department in early 2023. But in the meantime, we've been able in every area to keep generating good ideas and to keep having good interactions in the team with clarity as to who is doing what, with the value of the ideas brought to the table that were competitive. Stella also claims that there is more steam in the tank for McLaren's development choices. Some opponents believed McLaren had just discovered some cheap, fast lap time by replicating Red Bull as closely as possible in 2023, but would then hit a performance limit without a thorough knowledge of where to extract more performance. However, if Stella's statement is correct, McLaren clearly believes there is still opportunity for improvement. But Andrea Stella also is warned going against Red Bull while appraising McLaren's 2024 season possibilities during the surprising early 2024 debut. For one very particular reason. He thinks that, despite the fact that Red Bull provided relatively few updates on its record-breaking RB19 last year, it may have continued to develop it in the virtual world. The cost cap constraints which Red Bull notably broke in 2021, combined with the car's supremacy, meant Red Bull saw no need to provide a continual stream of improvements during the season. There were just two major bodywork alterations last season, both in the radiator inlet area, Azerbaijan in April and Hungary in July. Typically, any performance improvements discovered in simulation are turned into actual parts as soon as feasible and installed to the car. However, there are occasional outliers, which are sometimes due to resource constraints or a lack of funding. Although Red Bull will not have been hampered by resource or budget constraints, the cost cap limitation and the car's inherent advantage may have prompted the team to spend its resources elsewhere than on new development components. This would still allow Red Bull to improve its understanding over the season, even if the car's specifications stayed relatively constant. When we think specifically about Red Bull, said Stella at McLaren's livery launch, there's one element that obviously I think puts everyone in doubt as to what's going to happen in 2024, and it's the fact they haven't developed their car very much. So the question is, have they cashed in accumulated development that they will capitalize onto next year's car? This is my theory. I can't think that Red Bull were not in condition to develop their car, but they might have decided not to deliver upgrades. McLaren's 23 season was marked by a stunning performance improvement from Austria onwards, when its own pricey modifications went into effect. Stella is pleased that when designing the 2024 car, the performance improvement gradient remains reasonably steep. You always get to the point in a set of regulations where diminishing returns set in, he acknowledged. It could be that there's some areas of the car where you realize maybe the investment here is not worthwhile. But effectively so far, we have not found it that point. If you look at the car and the suspension, tires, aerodynamics, they all have still quite a lot to offer in this generation of regulations. So what we are looking at very carefully is to make sure we are in condition to cash in these performance opportunities that do seem to be available. This is reflected in the numbers. We can't fool ourselves. We need to see these numbers go up, and right now it's what we seem to be finding in development. But it's a slightly different story when it comes to competitiveness on track, because this depends on what your opposition has done. And when it comes to such rivals, Red Bull's RB20 has the potential to severely limit the results accessible to McLaren and the others. Red Bull certainly seems like they didn't develop last year to the level they could have if they wanted to, said CEO Zak Brown, echoing Stella's point. So that could be an unpleasant surprise for all of us. But about one thing Zak Brown is confident, and that is that Lando Norris can be convinced to commit his long-term Formula One career to McLaren, despite the British driver's continued interest from rival Red Bull. Norris currently holds a contract with McLaren, where he has raced since becoming F1 as a rookie in 2019, until the conclusion of the 2025 season. However, as uncertainty over Sergio Perez's position as Max Verstappen's teammate at Red Bull persists, due to Perez's poor pace and race performance against the world champion, speculation persists that the team may make an audacious move for another driver, especially if other potential Perez replacements at AlphaTauri, Daniel Ricciardo and Yuki Tsunoda, are not deemed worthy of promotion. Norris had previously attracted attention from Red Bull, having been offered a drive at what was then known as Toro Rosso in 2018 while racing in Formula 2, and Red Bull team manager Christian Horner has confirmed, "We've spoken to Lando a couple of times over the years." Norris has continued to get informal interest from Red Bull after signing his new McLaren contract in early 2022, and he is believed to get along well with Verstappen. When asked how serious Red Bull is thought to be about signing Norris at McLaren's 2024 livery launch event, Brown replied, "I have a belief that whether it's employees, drivers, sponsors, that's our job to take care of them and for them to want to be at McLaren. So, I tend to focus on making sure that McLaren is the best place environment and people want to be with us, because you ultimately can't control external approaches to those various people. So no, I'm very confident the relationship that we have with Lando remains strong. I know he's very excited for this year and was very impressed with what he saw in the second half of last year. He loves working with Andrea and everyone on the team. So, all we need to keep doing is giving him the environment he wants to be in. And then I'm confident he'll stick around, as opposed to trying to kind of sell against the competition. That's never been my way. What do you think? Do McLaren stand a chance this year against Red Bull, and will this keep Lando Norris on board for the long term? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below.